Chapter 11. Salt as Money. 1. The White Gold Standard. Picture this. Ancient China. The year is 200 BC. A merchant stands at the crossroads of the Silk Road. In his hands, he holds something more precious than jade, more trusted than bronze coins. He holds salt. Not just any salt. These are pressed salt bars, each one stamped with the imperial seal, each one worth its weight in survival. This is money, real money. Before paper currency, before gold coins became universal, salt was the currency of choice across vast stretches of Asia and Africa. Why? Because salt had something most metals lacked: universal need. Everyone needed it, rich and poor alike, emperor and peasant, merchant and soldier. You couldn't fake its value, you couldn't dilute its power. A bar of salt kept its worth whether you were in the mountains of Tibet or the markets of Chengdu. The system was brilliant in its simplicity. Salt bars were molded into standard sizes, stamped with official marks, traded across thousands of miles. They never lost their purchasing power because they never lost their usefulness. If times got hard, you could always break off a piece for your food. If times got harder, you could barter it for grain. And if you struck it rich, well, you could stack your wealth in a storehouse and know it would still be valuable decades later. This wasn't primitive economics. This was genius. The salt bar represented something economists still search for today: a currency with intrinsic value, a medium of exchange that doubles as a survival tool. Gold can't season your rice, silver won't preserve your meat, but salt? Salt kept you alive while making you wealthy. 2. The Roman salary. Now let's travel west. Rome, the heart of an empire that stretched from Britain to Egypt. Here, salt took on a different form of monetary power, not as coins or bars, but as compensation, as payment for service. The Roman soldier, disciplined, loyal, the backbone of the greatest military machine the ancient world had ever seen. How did Rome keep this massive army fed and content? Salt. Each legionnaire received a regular allowance of salt, a ration that was as essential as his sword or his sandals. This allowance had a name: salarium, the salt money. From this Latin word, we get our modern term, salary. Think about that for a moment. Every time you receive your paycheck, every time someone talks about their annual salary, they're echoing an ancient Roman system based on salt. The genius of the salarium wasn't just economic, it was psychological. Salt was portable, non-perishable, always in demand. A soldier could trade his salt ration in any market town from Gaul to Judea. He could use it himself or sell it for coin. This flexibility gave Roman troops incredible mobility. They weren't dependent on local currencies. They weren't at the mercy of corrupt paymasters. They carried their wealth in the most liquid commodity of the ancient world: salt. Some historians argue that soldiers received actual coins to buy salt. Others insist they received the salt itself. The debate continues. But here's what we know for certain. Salt was so central to Roman military logistics that it shaped their vocabulary, it influenced their trade routes, it determined the location of their camps and forts. Roads were built to transport it, wars were fought to secure it, treaties were signed to guarantee access to it. The salarium wasn't just payment, it was the glue that held an empire together. And when you think about it, that makes perfect sense, because Rome understood something fundamental about power. Control the salt, control the people.
3. African salt bars. Now let's journey south, deep into the Sahara, into the scorching heart of Africa. Here, in the ancient kingdoms of Mali and Songhai, salt took on yet another form: massive rectangular slabs, each one weighing as much as a small child. These weren't delicate bars you could slip into a pocket. These were monuments to salt's value. Chunks so large they required pack animals to transport, so precious they were worth more than gold. Yes, more than gold. The famous trans-Saharan trade routes operated on a stunning equation. In the salt mines of Tagaza, deep in the desert, a pound of salt was literally worth a pound of gold in the southern markets. Imagine that exchange. A merchant from Timbuktu stands in the shade of a date palm. Before him, gleaming slabs of white salt. Beside him, pouches of gold dust. One for one, weight for weight. Why such value? Geography, biology, desperation. The tropical kingdoms of West Africa had gold in abundance. What they lacked was salt. And in the crushing heat of the equator, salt wasn't a luxury, it was survival. Without it, their crops withered, their livestock died, their people suffered muscle cramps, exhaustion, heat stroke. Salt was the invisible thread that held their civilization together. So they paid in gold, gladly. The salt bars themselves became a form of architecture. In some desert outposts, entire buildings were constructed from salt blocks, walls of crystallized brine that could be carved, stacked, and, when times got desperate, dissolved into cooking pots. This was money you could eat, currency you could literally consume. And the trade routes that carried these bars carved permanent scars across the Sahara, paths worn deep by centuries of camel caravans, each animal laden with salt, each journey a gamble against thirst and sandstorms. The merchants who survived became legends, men who knew every oasis, every waterhole, every bandit ambush point along the route. They were the original investment bankers, trading in white gold, calculating risk versus reward in grains of salt and grains of sand. And at the end of each journey, whether in the markets of Marrakesh or the trading posts of Ghana, the salt bars were divided, weighed, and redistributed. Each chunk became smaller, each piece passed through more hands, until finally, somewhere in a village kitchen, a woman would scrape a few precious crystals into her cooking pot. And in that moment, the salt bar completed its transformation, from currency to commodity, from wealth to sustenance, from money to meaning.
Fast forward to today. Walk into any language, any culture, any corner of the modern world. The fingerprints of salt's monetary legacy are everywhere. We've already mentioned salary, but that's just the beginning. In English, when someone isn't performing well, we say they're not worth their salt, a direct echo of the Roman salarium, a judgment based on salt compensation. In Arabic, the word for salt and the word for protection share the same root. Why? Because salt was the currency of trust. Breaking bread with someone, sharing salt, created a bond, a contract enforced not by law, but by honor. In parts of Ethiopia, until shockingly recently, salt bars called Amoleh were still in circulation. As late as the 20th century, you could buy grain with salt, pay taxes with salt, save for the future in salt. The transition to paper money didn't happen overnight, and in remote areas, it didn't happen at all. Because paper money requires something salt never did: trust in an abstraction. You have to believe that this piece of printed paper represents value, that some distant government or bank will honor it, that it won't become worthless overnight due to inflation or political collapse. Salt required no such leap of faith. Its value was self-evident, physical, immediate. Modern economists searching for the ideal currency often list the same criteria: durability, portability, divisibility, universal acceptance. Salt scored perfectly on 3 out of 4. Its only weakness? Moisture. Get it wet and it dissolves. But in arid climates, in desert kingdoms and mountain strongholds, even that wasn't a problem. So when we trace the evolution of money, we see a pattern. From useful commodities to standardized coins, from precious metals to paper promises, from physical currency to digital abstractions. Each step moved us further from tangible value. Each innovation required more trust, more infrastructure, more centralized control. Salt was the beginning of that journey, the first currency that wasn't just pretty or rare, but genuinely life-sustaining. And perhaps that's the deepest legacy of salt money.
It reminds us that the best currencies aren't just stores of value, they're embodiments of human need, reflections of what we truly require to survive. Gold is beautiful, but you can't eat it. Paper is convenient, but it won't keep your meat from rotting. Salt did both. It was money with meaning, currency with purpose. And in that crystalline combination, salt taught humanity its first lesson in economics. Value isn't abstract, it's edible.